where he met the prominent figures like Walter Isert, Ronald Miller, and John Park. He also attended the Regional Science Association meeting in Michigan, November 1971. We know that his important work include the article title, Regional Income Disparities, published in the Bulletin of Indonesian Economic Studies. And another significant contribution of Professor Hendra is the establishment of Indonesian First Center of Regional Economics, the Lembaga Penelitian Ekonomi Regional at Universitas Andalas. I believe this event is important and beneficial, especially its goal to enhance the science of regional development analysis in Indonesia and to encourage younger academics to strengthen their contribution in the field of regional development. I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Iwan Jaya Azis, who will be delivering to Hendra Esmara Lecture titled The Limitations of Economic and Regional Science. Also, thank you Professor Syafruddin Karimi and Professor Budy Resosudarmo, who will provide us with their insight on review on methods in economics and regional science. Lastly, I would like to thank the supporter of this event, Universitas Andalas, of course, Cornell University, and Australian National University. That concludes my speech. I hope this event proceeds smoothly and bring great benefit to us all. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Johnny, for your introductory remarks. Now we begin the lecture session as I invite our MSc PhD to take the lead for the first. Yet I will read a brief CV about Mr. Endrizal first. So, Mr. Endrizal was born in Payakumbuh, 1972. He graduated from Andalas University for taking his economics degree in bachelor. Then he went to Australian National University for his master degree in economics and to the University of Indiana University Bloomington for his doctoral degree. His field research is in macroeconomics, and his current role as the Vice Dean of Academic Affairs of the Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Andalas. To Mr. Endrizal for taking the first session as a moderator, time is yours. University Bloomington for his doctoral degree. Andalas.
The Hendra Esmara Lecture for Regional Development in honor our late Professor Hendra Esmara, one of the pioneers of regional studies in Indonesia. Many of his students, academic children or academic grandchildren, are attending his the lecture here offline or online through Zoom meeting. In honor our late Professor Hendra, I have no difficulties. One of the introduce Prof. Regional Studies in Indonesia. We call his writings are everywhere. Academic children, and even like here, grandchildren, he has his own writing. His Iwan Azis here, zero line or I just saw this morning. IwanAzis.com. His broad range of activities positions. I take Professor of Emerging Markets within the Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management, Cornell University, USA, and also professor at the Department of Economics, Universitas of Indonesia. He holds bachelor degree from Universitas of Indonesia and master and PhD degree from Cornell University. Dyson School of He is a prominent scholar in regional economics. He was awarded distinguished scholar in regional science, financial economics, and from Universitas of Indonesia, 2006, and he is the recipient. 2022 Clifton Wharton Junior Emerging Scholar in Regional Economics University. So this research focuses on interlink between macro-financial economics, social institutions, and spatial inequalities in emerging markets. Let's welcome to the stage Professor Iwan Jaya Azis. This research focuses on interlink between today, Professor Iwan will deliver a keynote speech on the limitations of economics and regional science. In his recent book, Regional Economics, Fundamental Concept, Policies, and Institutions, he emphasizes the role of space in economics and highlights the importance of non-economic factors, particularly the role of institutions in regional development of economics. I quote some interesting questions from the book. Its back cover. Regional economics. First, why do activities tend to be spatially concentrated and can get more intensified despite efforts to disperse them toward other regions? Meanwhile, in economics, people respond to incentive. Back in university.
can be beautiful tree, it can be useful because of the trees and so forth. But in any trees, in any plant, there's a root here, right? And it is the root of the tree that matters. So the same thing in economics, the root of economics as a discipline be beautiful. I don't know how many of you still remember the basic theory of economic welfare. Why is this important? Why this is the root? Because what is economics? Economics is there to improve the welfare of the society, right? So the most important concept or theory in economics is theory of welfare economics, basically, right? So I wonder how many of you knows that there are two theorems of welfare economics. My guess is, and I may be wrong here, my guess is most of the teachers were talking only about the first one. And the first theorem of welfare economics says that market, i.e. competition, is the one that will guarantee Pareto optimum. I'm sure all the teachers in economics are teaching that, right? And they show the proof and everything. But hardly they talk about the second theorem of welfare economics. What the second theorem says is basically there is no guarantee of the welfare distribution of that Pareto optimum unless there is redistribution. This is the root of the tree. This is not the branch of the tree. This is talking about the first theorem of welfare economics. That means you have a tree that is really not strong because your root is only half of it. There is you can Google it later. The second theorem of welfare economics. It's so critical. This is not and branch of the I can visualize why the world, that means you have a Indonesia that is really not strong. It's not doing very well. Your in terms of welfare, you can Google it later. I'm not saying entirely, but partly it's so because we economists are to blame, and because we are only focusing on the first theory of welfare economics. That means which is market competition, efficiency, and in terms of welfare. If you look at part of housing in this highly, but because we economists are to blame, and because I'm about to suggest forget about all the slide. I can summarize it. Okay, which is market competition. Okay, later on you look at the slide. Let's pass the slide one by one. Let me tell you what's going on around the world. Okay? If you look at the output income GDP, it's going like this. Especially after the Industrial Revolution, I can summarize it. Okay. So after the 18th century, it goes like that. Let's pass the slide one by one. But if you look at the distribution, let me tell you what's going on among countries as well among the name of revolution. I can forget what the name here. Just if you look at the ratio between the top 10% and the bottom 50% around the world, the distribution, it's getting worse. I don't care what source of data that you're using. It's all getting among countries as well among the sign of improvement of welfare. Forget what the name here. If you look at the ratio, it's around the world. It's happening around the world. The chart you can see later. The chart. It's getting worse around the world. Now, it's getting one of the key reasons behind the worsening income inequality around the world is the wealth quality. I'm sure you know in economics, there is a difference between wealth and income. Wealth is a stock concept. Income is flow concept. Now, so imagine any of you from the accountancy here. Okay, imagine wealth is like the balance sheet of a company. Whereas income is like cash flow. So basically, they're telling you what's happening in 12 months in a year. But the balance is, that's the balance sheet here. Wealth is balance sheet. And I was just telling you a few minutes ago, the wealth around the world is so bad. If you look at the ratio between the top 10% and the bottom 50%, you don't need to be rocket scientists. If the wealth distribution is so bad, but the balance income is also so bad. That's the balance sheet. Because income comes is balance from the wealth. And I was just telling if I don't have wealth, I don't have income. Around the world. By the way, so there are three types of wealth. The ratio between human wealth, the top 10. If you were working in a factory or you use your wealth, which is called the human wealth, right? You may get some salary, but the second one is financial wealth. If you have stock, you have some savings, those are the financial wealth. And then the third is really the wealth that is not financial, like property wealth. So if you have a house, you have land, and so on. But every single wealth, so whether it's wealth, factory, or financial wealth, it will generate income. Financial wealth in the world is like this. Very, so something is not right. I remember back in 1972, when I entered University of Indonesia and I took the first class on economics. My teacher told me in any economy, there has to be financial sector. Why? Because any economy will not move if there is no finance. Either it's bank or non-bank. So pay attention on that statement. In any economy, they need financial sector to finance the real economy. So the financial sector has to be there to finance the real sector, right? But if the world trend of GDP is like this, the trend of financial sector like this, something is not right. Because the financial sector, it's not there to finance the real sector, but it's there as its own king. So it generates income. Very simple. Suppose must sell me bonds. Bonds is a piece of paper and the writing is IOU. Okay, so suppose he sell me, let's say the value is 100. Within one day, that piece of paper, the same piece of paper can value 1 million. That's financial sector. Why? Because it's all in the market perception. And yet, I don't produce anything. I just got that piece of paper.
Recording in progress.
The next morning, I got 1 million. That's the simplistic way to describe what is financial sector, financial instrument. And it can be bonds, it can be stock, it can be mutual fund, it can be derivative, anything, okay? This is the sad part. Even in the countries where I live, in the US, the professor teaches students, developed countries has a lot more financial instruments than the poor country, let's say Africa. As if you want to be a developed country, you have to have as many as possible financial instruments. But that's exactly what happened. So you have more financial instrument, but you don't produce. But you get rich just because of a piece of paper. So That is the condition that is happening around the world. I think it's enough for me to convince you something is not right with the income inequality and wealth inequality. Okay? Move to the area that Budy has a very strong passion on, environment. This is the trend. You can check later on, okay? From 1700, so how many centuries ago? 1700 goes all of a sudden after industrial revolution, CO2 emission like this. Pollution started to go up. Is that an improvement of welfare? I'm coming back to the very basic definition of economics. Why economics is there is to improve the welfare of the society. So when the overall economy shows GDP increase by, let's say, 7%, but majority of the member of the society get a very, very small amount of that 7% growth, and the air quality is getting worse, I don't know if it is called welfare. With that fact, I call it reality check. Economics as a discipline failed. I'm openly declaring economics failed. Okay? There's a good news though. I hope I'm not giving you the sober news only this morning, but I'll give you good news. If you look at a number of economic concept and theory, it's so useful for day-to-day life. But it has been abused by some, not all, but some of the important economists. When I said important, some of them are Nobel Prize winner in economics. Or if it is not Nobel Prize winner, they are really the well-known economists quoted by any economist around the world. Let me give you just one name. In fact, at the end of my chart, I have the picture of the person. Have any of you heard the name David Ricardo? He is the culprit. But many professors of economics says he is the father of international trade, right? Why? Because people like Adam Smith, people like Marshall, they really stick with what is economics. That is discipline to improve human being life, the welfare, right? But David Ricardo, now, to be fair with him, I don't think he intended to create like what we are now, okay? But he is the one who tried to abstract that concept of ethics, social welfare, and so forth. He's trying to abstract. Why David Ricardo was so famous? Because he's the one who first to introduce mathematics to make economics looks like scientific. He's the one, and brilliant. He's a good mathematician as well. So he's brilliant. Theory of comparative advantage, all rooted in his ideas, basically. But since then, thing is getting worse and worse in terms of going into extreme. I remember Stephen Jeffens, that's another economist of the 19th centuries, who criticized David Ricardo. Basically, the debate is about, we are talking about human life, which is not all of them can be mathematized. Not all of them can be quantified. For example, feeling, how do you quantify feeling and so forth? Or, you know, empathy, sense of empathy. It's not all of them. Some of them you can. So since then, economics as a discipline is getting more and more. Mathematics is not important. Not at all. Very important. Mathematics is very important for economics. But there are two different features here. one feature is people who wants to create a new theory in mathematics, in economics, they have to know mathematics, no doubt about it. Why? Simply because society are so complex and human brain has limitations. There are only 85 billion neurons, right? They cannot synthesize the complexity of society or even one human being. It's so complex here. And that's why mathematics can be very useful. Something that is complex can be simplified by sometimes by just one equation, okay? So that is useful there. That is the line of making economics quantitative for the sake of generating theory, right? But then there's another line, which I call, it's not theoretical, but abstract. Believe me, there are some economies, even in developed countries, love doing that. They love to take the first derivative, second derivative, third derivative, fourth derivative, as if there's a meaning in human life. There's nothing, zero. But mathematically is elegant. I don't need to mention the name of the university, but there are some of them. This is what I feel it's a bit sad that there was a period that the people, especially the young people who wants to study economics, they are driven toward that direction. That's the bad news. Here's the good news. Thank God. Well, I know sounds ironical because it's so sad, right? The income inequality is worsening, environmental is getting worse and so on. It's so sad. But there is a positive side of it. Economists' mind started to open up. Something is not right here. And that's why there's a branch of economists who started to think more and more about the real world situation. You know, the joke is, if you want to annoy economists, ask them about real world. That's the joke. Because people started to be very cynical against economists because they're talking about something which is not real world. Okay? So from that standpoint, I think there is a new and good trend, and I hope the students as well as the young faculty members from the University of Andalas will follow. You still need that. Secondly, human behavior. I'm sure many of you knows about consumption function. Whether you are teaching microeconomics or macroeconomics, there has to be some consumption function somewhere there, right? If you think very deeply, that is the most difficult topics in economics. Why? Because you're dealing with the propensity of human being to spend money for consumption, for pleasure, for hedonic purpose, right? And yet, economists are so proud. They develop the most advanced consumption function. It's a functions of price, it's a functions of price of other goods, it's functions of income, it's functions of life cycle, and on and on and on. None of them works. The proof is in the pudding. Look at the US economy. In the US economy, 72% of the total GDP come from consumption. In Indonesia, it's about 60%, between 55 and 60%. In the US, 72%. Look what happened in 2008 when there was a global financial crisis. If they really understand the work of the consumption behavior, it should be easy, right? Just focus on how to raise the consumption because it constitutes 72% of the total GDP. But they fail. None of the consumption function built by all those Nobel Prize winners works. Why? Because the behavior of the human being, it's so complex. And this is one of the explanation why now in some university, I know in MIT, if you're going to take a PhD, you have to take a course on neuroeconomics. Why? Because the act of consuming, the act of buying, if you go to a store, why you decide to buy that stuff? It's all because your neurons is working. But there are 85 billion neurons in human brain. How do you know which neuron is firing when you start to buy? Or you decide not to buy. So this is what they have been trying to find, which neuron. And finally, and this was found not by economists, by neuroscientists, they found the neuron that sparked when people decided to buy. And that is called nucleus accumbens. That is the name of the neuron, nucleus accumbens. Whenever that neuron, nucleus accumbens, spark, you buy. Consumption goes up. So, I mean, jokingly speaking, if the economy is in a recession, let's find ways how to spark the neuron so that everybody, sort of example, but what I'm trying to say here, we economists, we have to be very humble. We don't know many things. So, of economics. Another limitation, and this is in the context of IRSA. For many decades, economists always believe that there will be an equilibrium given certain assumption. But none of them was treating space explicitly. They're only taking it implicitly. I remember the debate between Samuelson and Walter Isart. Walter Isart is the founding father of regional science. When Walter raised the question to Paul Samuelson, the late Paul Samuelson, what about, let's say, I produce this in Padang, Budy produced the same product in Surabaya. How do you deal with that? How do economists deal with that? And Samuelson said, oh, we can treat this as a different product. So even though this is the same, but Samuelson argued that this is different product because it's produced somewhere else. That answer itself already violated the law of one price. Because, you know, in economics, there's a law of one price, one commodity with the same price. The reason why Samuelson replied that way, because economics, I'm not talking about the right kind of economics, but the wrong kind of economics, treat distance and location implicit, not explicit. And that's why they can come up with a beautiful model that leads to general equilibrium, Pareto optimum. But if you go in more detail, let's say there are two players, you know, in Edwards box diagram, usually only two, right? Imagine there are two players here, but the moment one of the players said, I'm going to produce in different location, I'm going to move, breaks down. You can, those who knows about mathematics, you can see it breaks down. There is no equilibrium. Once one of the players decided to move to different location. So that's why most of the regional economics or regional science always says, the trouble is when economic players or economic agents has an address, alamat rumah atau alamat kantor, address. So in other words, and this is the word from Paul Krugman, okay? You know Paul Krugman, right? So Krugman said that all the economic equilibrium works until one of the players has an address. That implies that economics assume no one has an address. It doesn't matter where do you locate. But the moment you identify economic agent has a location, breaks down. And that is the power of regional science. And that's why please clap our hand for IRSA, Indonesian Regional Science Association. No, of course, I'm saying this not because I was trained as a regional science, but if you think seriously about real world situation and we try to contribute by our discipline, because I'm assuming we are all academician scientists, right? If we are businessmen, of course, we can contribute by producing something efficiently. If we are, artists, maybe we can, but we are all academician, right? So think about that. What can we contribute to the concrete improvement of the society welfare? So from that standpoint, regional science is above economics because we recognize the location, we recognize the address of economic agents. And the moment we recognize that, we have to come up with a new equilibrium. This is the reasons why people like, Fujita and Tony Smith came up with the spatial equilibrium, because the spatial equilibrium is not the same with economic equilibrium that we learn in economics. Okay, so that's the second thing. That's about the location. The next one is non-economic factors. I think he was quoted earlier about, one of my arguments about the importance of non-economic factors. We all know that society is not living in a vacuum. Society living in an environment where there was a history, there was a culture, there was a tradition, there is norms, and the degree of trust among the society is different in one society compared to another society, right? So when you are trying to incorporate those into your economic analysis, I'm sorry to say, maybe 75% of the conclusions from the pure technical economics analysis is not working, breaks down. I happen to experience the last 3 years because of my research on SME, so traveling from Aceh to Papua. My goodness, there's a lot of things that economists have to learn. How to incorporate different culture, different tradition of the different society into their analysis. See, the good news is that it can be done. So it's not that it cannot be done. It can be done. I'm going to speak a little bit more to just pick an example of efficiency. Imagine there is a society where they operate in an efficient way as we understand, as we perceive, at least based on economics that we studied, right? So they produce very productively, they work hard, they use as small as possible number of inputs, because productivity is defined as you produce the same level of output with the less number of input and things like that. And let's assume, let's make another good feature here. You're not polluting the air, and you are not degrading the natural resources, because natural resource degradation and then pollution and so forth, it's really damaging the environment, right? So let's assume you're doing that. So in that kind of society, I'm sure you imagine, wow, rule of law works, right? So that means if there is one bad apple in that society, that bad apple will be punished. Now, how do you punish that bad apple? It depends on the different society. The law is different in different society and so forth. But I've seen myself a society in this beautiful country where if there is a so-called bad apple, the punishment is the opposite of what I know, what I believe is majority of you believe. Let me give an example. In a society where they live very sustainably, they only eat what they grow. So they don't buy stuff in the market. They only eat what they grow. One of the black spots in the Indonesian development is stunting. I'm sure you know that. If you look at the world map, in almost all indicators, red is bad, green is good. Indonesia is yellow. It's always middle, whether it's income, life expectancy, and so we are okay. But when it comes to stunting, we are red. You know that, right? So translate that into the map of Indonesia. Where is the highest stunting rate? It's in NTT. Translate that into the map of NTT. Where is the biggest stunting in NTT? It's in Kabupaten named TTS, Timur Tengah Selatan. 50%. What does it mean? That means half of the future labor force during Indonesia Emas, half of them are stunting. I don't need to elaborate what is the meaning of having stunting. You lose your cognitive ability. That means you cannot be productive. How can it be Indonesia Emas, half of the labor force are not productive? It's impossible. Okay? But in the same Kabupaten, TTS, there was a village where the stunting rate is 0. How could that happen? So when I visited that community, it turns out exactly what I told you. They only eat what they grow. Now, coming back about the rule of law, remember I was raising this example because I'm trying to talk about law enforcement here. If there is a thief in that community, the punishment is the next day, the entire community goes to the house of the thief and plant the tree. That's the punishment. Now, how do you judge that community? Is that community not living sustainably? And if you go there, they are all very happy looking. Well, wasn't Adam Smith talk about society welfare? This is society welfare. No, but don't misunderstand me. I'm picking that extreme example. It doesn't mean that we all have to be like that. No, we all have different culture. We have all different, propensity and so forth. But the point I'm trying to say here is that it's not guaranteed what we are studying in economics will generate improvement in the welfare. There are still many things that economics have to sort of learn, and the discipline itself has to be adjusted. I think in the afternoon, I'm supposed to give a lecture on macroeconomics. So I will give an example in that. How do you adjust the macroeconomics? Because macroeconomics, believe it, macroeconomics was built in the other country by the other people with the other culture, the other living environment. And yet we are using it, right? As if that is really God-given rule in macroeconomics. So we forgot that we are living in completely different environment, different society. So that leads me to the last point. And that is about economics is too much deductive. We learn economics during our student days. We learn the concept, we learn the theory and so forth. And then we try to test that theory with the real world situation. It sounds okay, it sounds normal. But what about if whatever the theory says doesn't match with what you observe on the ground? Well, there are two possibilities. One is you try to manage the data in such that it matches with your theory, all right? Or you try to advise the community, the real community, you have to do this, you have to follow the theory. So that means the theory will advise the real world situation to change rather than the theory trying to understand what is the reality, right? And that is deductive versus inductive. Both are important, definitely both are important. But unfortunately, economics as of today are too much deductive, not enough inductive. The simple way to describe what is inductive is, let's say we observe there's a lot of poverty in Indonesia Timur, okay? What do you do as an economist? You don't build model, you don't go to the theory collecting data, no. If you try to understand and help the poverty condition in Indonesia Timur, go to Indonesia Timur. It's very simple. If you do not know what is behind this wall, go behind the wall. Simple. No complicated philosophy here. Go to Indonesia Timur, observe what's going on there. Let me put aside a little bit because there is another aspect I want to share with you. One of the discipline that is now growing around the world, it's called design thinking. If you go to the Google, type it, design thinking, it's spread all over. The big companies are using it. Google, Amazon, IBM, they're all using that. Let me quickly explain to you because this is 2 semesters design thinking, but let me explain in 5 minutes here. Basically, design thinking is problem solving. Now, I know it sounds like very simple, one word, problem solving. So imagine this, letter T, okay? So when you are presented a problem, whether it's a poverty, stunting, or tourism, or manufacturing, any problem, you have to be the top of the letter T, horizontal. Meaning what? Meaning you have to observe and listen to people. And what I said, listen, I mean listen, not hearing. You know the difference between hearing and listening. Listen. So listen to the lawyer, listen to the medical science, listen to psychologists, listen to anthropologists, listen to expert on plantation. Listen to them. Because you, as an economist, you are not the God. You are not the best person. You have to listen first. Okay? Now, only after you listen, each of the participant in that flat area has their own expertise. You are an economist. You can use from your economic knowledge what can be done after you listening to all these people. If you're a lawyer, what can be done? There is the bottom of the T. So be a T person. Unfortunately, I know too many economists, when they are presented with a problem, they think they know the best, so they are letter I. This is the solution. And as a result, the outcome, even if on the paper the outcome looks good, believe me, there are so many negative repercussions of that outcome, whether it's inequality, whether it's environmental degradation, because you don't listen. So if you listen, you're not only realizing the limitation of economics. So actually the title of my talk, the limitation, you don't need to listen to me actually. If you practice yourself in day-to-day life by being T person, you know that title because you will realize yourself economics has limitation. So if you are T person, you will listen to that. Now, the next one is how do you translate that horizontal part of T into the vertical part? There are two different ways of listening to people. Listen and listen. Let me give you one example because it becomes more psychological, more sociological. It can be 2 semesters here. So let me just give one example. I hope this one example give you what is really what I'm trying to say here. Do you know that there is kabupaten named Bener Meriah? It's in Aceh, right? So part of my research, I need to understand the problems faced by coffee farmers because of the climate change. That's my mission. The first person I contact is the NGO of that area. And finally, they find the farmers whom I'm supposed to interview and to discuss and so on. So I flew there. Unfortunately, when I landed, it was picked up by Bupati. That is already bad sign. The Bupati of the Kabupaten. And then the Bupati took me to a big hall, bigger than this one, and then hundreds of coffee farmers there. That's a second bad sign. And then the Bupati said, Bapak kan mau mendengar, mau listen, but not this kind of listen. You have to understand the human psychology. When farmers talking with you, but there is pejabat, I guarantee they cannot be 100% truthful. I guarantee that. So I complained to my NGO friend, I don't want this. But of course, out of politeness, I follow. So for 2-3 hours, we're having discussion, tanda kutip, discussion. But then I told my friend, arrange another one without any pejabat. So the next day, he arranged and said, the same person, the same farmers. I asked the same question. The answer is black and white. So I hope you understand what I mean by listen, okay? Listen and listen are two different things. Now, since you are all academics, you are going to do research, a lot of research, right? And I'm sure part of your research requires some field surveys. Unless you're writing, you go to the field to understand and to listen to the people, right? This is the common practice. If you are going to write a PhD dissertation, for example, you know the topic, you read a lot of books, you know the issues and so on, and then you build a questionnaire, right? And then with that questionnaire, you go to the field. You ask based on that questionnaire. Of course, the respondent will, this is the beautiful thing about Indonesian people. They are very friendly, they are very kind to us. They will answer to you. They give the answer here. But how do you know that those questions are the one that is in their brain 24 hours a day? How do you know that they are the priority of their life? So compare that with different scenario. And the different scenario is this. There is an issue that you are interested to write for your dissertation involving community A. You go to the community A, you discuss for, I don't know, for a week or for a couple of days. Ideally, you live with them. In design thinking, this is called homestay. There's a term homestay, which is basically you stay with them, you live with them, for you to observe what are their problems 24 hours a day. After you do that, you come back to your university, it's guaranteed your questionnaire will be different than the questionnaire that you prepare beforehand. It's different because now your questionnaires reflects the real concern of those people that you're supposed to help. And only after that, then you can go to the region to do the questionnaire. So in other words, I'm talking about two stages here. Stage one is just to build the questionnaire itself, requiring you to listen to them. And once you have that, that you can sort of implement that questionnaires. Okay? So that is some sort of an example which I hope you understand the message that I'm trying to say here. And that is in the context of the limitation of economics. Now, as I promised, 2 minutes? Okay. As I promised, I know I'm old, but I still remember what I said a few minutes ago. I said that at the end, I'm going to say a few words about how do you deal with inductive versus deductive, right? Most of economics that we learn, it's deductive. We learn about the theory, concept, and then we apply into the real world situation. So that means the first part, you start with objective, everything objective, you know, whether it's mathematical economics, econometrics, very objective, right? And then you apply it, you run the model, and without you realizing, you impose your subjectivity. Let's take an example. Suppose you run a regression and your R square is 0.5. Do you accept that? Some said yes, some said no. That is subjective. That's your subjectivity, right? It depends on your own belief. So you start with objective models, beautiful models, collecting data. At the end, you use your subjectivity. That is deductive. What about you reverse it? You're interested with an event in, I don't know, in Payakumbuh, in Bukit Tinggi. Let's say about SME, UMKM, yeah? Observe them. Observe them. Now, let's say you're two of you, A and B, okay? You and your friend. When you observe, that is subjective. I think, oh, this UMKM, they need financing, for example. My friend said, no, right? That's subjectivity. Now, your challenge is how, based on your subjectivity, you develop a certain method that will lead to an objective outcome. So you reverse. Rather than starting from objectivity to subjectivity, you reverse. Start with subjectivity. Try to find the objectivity. This one is deductive. This one is inductive. Now, many of you may ask, is there any method of that? Yes, there are. Not there is, there are several. And I've been trying to use this the last 3 years, you know, through the Bank Indonesia, who asked me to do a research on UMKM. I use that. There is a way to do that. So you observe first, and then you try to develop a certain method. Okay? So let me close by saying what I said at the beginning. The spirit behind the topic that I'm giving you here is not trying to degrade economics as discipline or regional science. No, I don't. That's not my field. Otherwise, I will lose my job because I'm still an economist, right? But the purpose is I'm thinking about 2045. So when you graduated, I cannot imagine if you're still studying the wrong kind of economics. And then you go out to the market, you see the market is very different. I don't have time. I haven't talked about the role of artificial intelligence. I have a couple of things. I haven't talked about the role of digital technology. It affects economics. Okay, but in the afternoon I will talk about it. So that is the spirit to prepare you to welcome the real Indonesia Emas 2045. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Prof. That's very inspiring lecture. I don't want to summarize it, so let's open questions from the floor. Yeah, one of our students, probably. Okay, one. And Ridwan, you want? Two. Paudan, comments? Three. Okay, so we collect three questions first. Start with Paudan, probably. Okay, it's not. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First, thanks to Prof. Iwan for sharing your knowledge with us before. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Rahmi. I want to ask you about, you told about GDP and welfare before. In this kind of situation, we get high GDP, but meanwhile the welfare is the opposite situation. I want to ask you, did you ever study before how to make balance between GDP and also distribution of the wealth poor and rich in this balance? GDP higher and also the distribution of the wealth being higher equal at the same time, because we know that most of the consumption in this country is did by the rich one, and that's why our GDP getting higher, and the government just being focused on the higher GDP number every year. So I just want to ask the solution from you. Okay, that's from me. Thank you.
Fahmi, please, Pak Ridwan, maybe. Yeah. So equality before growth of vice versa.
Well, sorry, if I'm block the camera. Okay. So first of all, I would like to say thank you to Professor Iwan Jaya Azis and also Professor Endrizal Ridwan to help that this discussion that very interesting and very insightful. Maybe it's not about question, but from my name is Ridwan and I'm from Bank Indonesia, West Sumatra region. Perhaps I'd like to share like my contribution to the other mahasiswa here in Universitas Andalas. I'm very strongly agree that Professor Iwan Jaya Azis said we have to, the economist is much thinking of inductive rather than deductive. Maybe as some person of, I would not say that I'm a purely economist, but as a person that has experience like 10 years in boosting the economics of other provinces, I would like to say that we are humbled by the political reality and also the real world situation. We are the economists sometimes thinking about that. The first lesson of our economics is the scarcity, right? So, about the political science is about how to ignore the scarcity. The first lesson of the economics, and we need to work together within the constraint between the economists and the political, because the political is always aimed to how long he will run in the office. On the other hand, we have the economists saying that we need to improve that our objective, the social welfare. There is we need to coordination. We need we are not God, just like Mr. Professor Iwan Jaya Azis said. We need more input from the multi-dimension of the academics. We can say that we need have discussion with other multidiscipline and also discussion to just like Professor said that we discussion with the farmers. A lot of that we can achieve. We can understand how the economics works, and also sometimes we think that the economics needs to understand of other sectors to better understand the complexity of the economics. Well, perhaps if you don't mind, I also I have the question regarding about the first question of the ladies before me, that they said that perhaps in the situation of the economics, we need to grow like every year, like every like never ending growth. I read a book about donut economics by Kate Raworth. She said actually that in these finite resources, is that really possible that we can have an infinite growth? That comes to your said in your book in regional economics that we have triple bottom line, in which the environment economics and also the social, if I'm not wrong. That maybe I'd like your opinion about this. Maybe that's my question and my take on this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pak Iwan. So it's very inspiring lectures. Yeah, thank you so much for your inspiration. But no, I would like to maybe ask you some things. Regarding Indonesia, we know that I think for the last 20 years, maybe more than 20 years, yeah, the tax ratio of Indonesia always tend to decrease. I suppose maybe from around 18, 17% in the era of 2000, and then now becoming about 10%. So there is a trend of reduction of tax ratio in Indonesia. On the other hand, we see that the local tax ratio also not decrease, but a little bit increase, but not sharply increase. If we look at the share in which the central government revenue is still dominant in terms of tax revenue. Now, that's the Indonesian phenomenon about the public finance. But now we, as you mentioned about the limitation of economics in terms of between finance and also the real sector. You said that in the world, everywhere in the world now, the real sector and the financial sector, there is a very high gap in which the real sector, the finance sector is not reflecting the real sector actually. So, but phenomenon like that. So we look at another country in which similar to Indonesia, the tax ratio is not reducing like that. So how do you explain this phenomenon regarding the Indonesian conditions, especially in terms of public finance? And then my question regarding the gap between real sector and financial sector. It's happened in the world. Maybe the trend will be like that since at least last 10 years. The solution, I suppose, is
maybe it is not maybe it is my mind. The solution of the gap between financial sector and the sector may be financial crisis. So some mention that some experts says that the only solution for the gap between the financial sector and the real sector is financial crisis. Is that right? What is your opinion? And the last one, this is about um, the method and the method that we economists always do tend to be quantitative and enforce our model and then make conclusion based on the model and so on. And then you suggest that we have to be more social science, I suppose, more triangulation, inductive, not deductive. So that's a good, good suggestion for us because we tend to become people the more inductive, more deductive than inductive. So I think that's maybe Pak Budy will explain that one later on, yeah, in the introduction of mixed method regarding that your suggestion. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Udan. So actually, there are two questions from online, from Zoom. The third question from Pak Udan is similar to question from Shahri TS on Zoom meeting. Yeah. And then the other question from Pak Eko Atmaji is that about limitation of economics. So whether the limitation become fewer because sophistication of the economic method or become more because some discoveries of social problems are hard to solve. So that's additional two questions from the Zoom meeting. So, but question from the floor, I'm sure Professor Ija record all of them. And let's hear what Prof. Ija opinion.
Why don't I start with the last one before I look at you? Actually, as I indicated earlier, there are some good news, and I think this is something to do with the nature of human being. You know, we tend to do what we are doing until we realize something is not right. Or sometimes it hits you directly. Let's say you lose job, for example. Then you started to rethink about what is wrong in the past. So I see the analogy here because the world economy overall, when I said economy, I'm not only talking about efficiency, but also inequality, about the environment, you know, sustainable development, basically. The world is really way staying away from there. The reality, I'm talking about reality. I'm not talking about statement made by, you know, public officials and so on. I'm talking about reality. All the data in my materials, you can see it's a fact there, right? And because of that, as I indicated earlier, a number of Department of Economics, Faculty of Economics started to make adjustment on the concept and the theory that they teach. So the answer is, because of that, I know people will argue, why do we have to wait until things are bad? Okay, but it's still better than if we don't do anything about it. So this is the time for you, for the new graduates or, you know, the upcoming graduates of Universitas Andalas to think very seriously about that. So it's not too late. Okay, so that's my response to that last question. So basically the question is very similar, the first two here, and that is something to do with, I think the specific question is, have I ever studied the growth and, you know, the social issues, right? That was the question. Have I ever studied? Short answer, yes, I did. That's my passion, actually. So if the question is, have I ever studied? The answer is yes, I did. Now, on your point about the similar, basically, you're asking, I'm sorry? Yeah, infinite growth and so on. You know, I know this sounds semantic, but think about this seriously. You know the difference in Bahasa Indonesia and Bahasa Inggris, right? Bahasa Inggris, you start the first and then the second, whereas Bahasa Indonesia is the reverse. Let me say, botol ini indah, right? Bahasa Indonesia said botol ini indah. It's a beautiful bottle. So bahasa Inggris mulai dengan beautifulnya, bukan bottle-nya, right? I'm sure you all heard about pro-poor growth. Have you heard that? I'm sure, because many public policymakers said. I disagree with that statement. Because if you say pro-poor growth, that means in Bahasa Inggris, okay? That means you first emphasize the growth. You're looking for the growth that can reduce the poverty. That's pro-poor growth. Why not poverty alleviation pro-growth? What about that? So in other words, pro-growth poverty alleviation in Bahasa Inggris, of course. In Bahasa Indonesia, you have to reverse it. So in other words, what about program or policies to focus on how to reduce the poverty? Let's say there are 5 scenarios of reducing poverty. Let's pick the scenario of poverty reduction that maximizes the growth. What about that? Right? That's why, every time I go to region, PEMDA was also always asking me, so what is the, because there are so many indicators that we have to think about health, about environment, but just simple one. If you become Bupati in T0, and I think Bupati is 4 years, right? So, 5 years, okay. In T0, poverty is 10%. By T5, look at the poverty. Is it reducing or not? The other is just secondary, whether it's growth or not growth, but poverty. So what about that? It's very simple. I know everybody talk about KPI, right? They're always complaining because there's so many KPI, environment, social, health. All right, just one, poverty. If you can reduce poverty, the other things will follow through. Your kesehatan will improve, your income will improve, your job, employment will improve, and so on. That's simple, right? So, when people talk about reducing growth or even eliminating growth, in fact, some people even said not just eliminating, some people even thinking about reducing the growth because they thought the environmental condition is bad enough, damaged so much that we need to reduce. This is the community called degrowth. There is a community, degrowth community, which is basically reduce the growth. I think that's too extreme. That's why I prefer to focus on whatever the issues that you want to deal. If it is environment, pro-environment first, and then when you try to develop a scenario or policies that are pro-environment, you come up with 6 or 7 policy. Okay, pick which one that will give you the highest growth. That is very different from pro-poor growth. I don't know who invented that term. My suspicion is one of the IFIs, whether it's the World Bank or the IMF, because that's the way they work. Growth. But then to the quote unquote the CSR of those organizations is okay, pro-poor, but still growth. So why not the reverse? So that's my comment on it. Is there any other question I missed? Actually, I think I can mention name. Pak Emil Salim always asks me about the situation and so on. To some extent, there's some element of truth. Yes, maybe to change things, because to change something that has been established for decades is so difficult, especially when it deals with the mindset. It's so difficult. It's the most difficult thing is to change mindset. And sometimes human being requires some shock to make a change. So in that sense, there's some element of truth that maybe we require a financial crisis. But there is no guarantee that it will change. I remember when the GFC, the 2008, hit the US economy. Can you imagine that? how many of you knows what caused the global financial crisis in 2008? Anybody knows? Huh? Property bubble, but this is not the five-star property. This is the subprime. You know subprime. You know, if you go to bank, if you're rich people, you will be treated as prime. But if you're poor people, you will be treated as subprime. Okay. So in the financial market, they're high and low. Subprime is among the lowest. Okay. Can you imagine the world's largest economy, American economy, was brought down by the smallest financial market? Subprime. That's dramatic, right? But if you try to trace how come the world's biggest economy fell down just because of the smallest market? Because if you look at who are involved in that, it's all human beings with all greed, all biases. But the cause can be there. So there are some element of truth. Maybe there is a crisis, but I was wrong. But I remember, I cannot mention name. I remember when they asked me, yes, we need crisis like this, because after this crisis, people's mindset will change, especially economists, especially the financial market. They will change. They didn't. So after the impact of the financial crisis receding, let's say in 2011, 2000, they started to behave the same thing, like before the global financial crisis. So that's why I'm also skeptical with my own sort of statement that we need a financial crisis. Maybe we need a more major crisis than same person asked me, Pak Iwan, do you think this COVID will lead to something good? Well, I learned from my mistake in 2008. I thought the answer is yes, but I don't know whether it will lead to some good. Yes, there are some signs of good now. I don't know in Sumatra, but around the world, people start to think about health more, talking about after COVID. And they also started to reach of life. You know, in United States now, they are having great difficulty to find workers, especially in the hospitality sector, like restaurant, hotels. People at home.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Truth about sometimes when we human being made a dramatic mistake, we need a dramatic shock. I think you can comment about tax ratio. Oh, yeah, tax ratio. You know, sometimes we forget, we means economists, okay? Sometimes economists forget in any variables, there are human being behind it. Who is behind tax? People who pay tax. Who is behind banks? Bankers, manusianya. Who is behind the export? Exporters, manusia. Understand their behavior. So if the taxpayers behave a certain way, in such the tax ratio decline, pay attention of what's happening with those taxpayers. The simple argument made by economists is when the economy is slowing down, right? When the economy is slowing down, people cannot pay tax. But I think it's much more than that. Understand their psychology. So the same thing here. Sometimes we forget, you know, we study monetary economics, we study trade economics, exchange rate. We forget there's people behind us. They are the one who make the decision. Understand them, why they behave the way they did. That's what sometimes economists forget.
Okay. Thank you very much. I am afraid the time is limited, and we can continue discussion with Prof. Iwan uh, when we have lecture on the afternoon in the Department of Economics. Know some question from online from Zoom, which is similar to the previous questions already answered. I have summary from the team, but the idea is we need to realize, the economists really need to realize the limitation of economics in several ways, such as methodology and ignorance about the space and so on and so forth. Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Iwan. Give applause to Prof. Iwan Jaya Azis. Now I give back to the MC for the second session. Okay, so and then here you go.
Thank you so much. Actually, I have one question to Professor Iwan, but due to we have time limitation, probably later I can have a discussion with you. Okay, thank you so much to Professor Iwan Jaya Azis for the insightful, and also to Mr. Endrizal Ridwan as a moderator. Oh, do you mind? Oh, okay.
Saya bukan tamu yang baik. Saya lupa bahwa ini acara untuk Pak Hendra Esmara. Ya. Jadi kita mengingat kontribusi Pak Hendra tidak hanya untuk Universitas Andalas, tapi juga untuk ekonomi Indonesia. Saya mohon maaf, saya lupa tadi mengucapkan. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have photo session together with Professor Iwan Jaya Azis. So please, Professor Syafruddin Karimi, Bapak Udan, Professor Weridata, Professor Budy, Professor Bapak Ferry, and also the rest of the honorable guests, feel free to be in front for the photo session. Okay, thank you so much. And the next session, we will have break for 10 minutes. We will have break for 10 minutes for committee. Are you guys ready for the snacks? So ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the snack that will be provided later. And then since we have 10 minutes breaks, and also for your information, we will have a lecture with Professor Iwan Jaya Azis offline at the Department of Economics and Business at 2 p.m. So everyone who would like to visit it, feel free to join the lecture session. And there's supposed to be a barcode where you can access the slides from Professor Iwan Jaya Azis. So we'll continue. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is a barcode that you can research for the slides from Professor Iwan Jaya Azis. And please enjoy the snack from our committee. And then please stay together in one room because we still have a second lecture session later with Professor Syafruddin Karimi and Professor Budy. Thank you. Okay, everyone's ready? Yeah, yeah. Okay. So We begin our second session as I invite our second moderator, Mr. Dr. Fijri Muharja, SA MSE, for the session with Professor Syafruddin Karimi from Universitas Andalas and Professor Budy from Australia National University. Yet I will read a brief CV about Mr. Fijri first. So Mr. Fijri was born in Pasir Lawas, Tanah Datar, 1976. He graduated both from Andalas University for finishing his bachelor and master degree. Then he went to Thammasat University in Bangkok, Thailand for his economics postgraduate programs. He got a scholarship for the Sandwich program initiated by the Ministry of Research and Technology to study at the University of Huddersfield in United Kingdom. And he back for his doctoral degree at Universitas Andalas for his doctoral degree in economics. And now his current role as the head of Department of Economics of the Faculty of Economic and Business and the president of Indonesian Economic Study Program Association, or known as APSAPI. Okay, to Mr. Fijri, time is yours.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In this good opportunity, I would like to express my thanks for your attention. Today we have the next session, the topic about social justice in macroeconomic school of thought, and then introduction to mixed method in economics. Thank you for all of you come to this seminar. Seminar. The first time coming, please, Professor Karimi. Professor Karimi lecture the senior lecture from Faculty of Economic, University Andalas. Graduate from the PhD program in Florida State University. The interest research about the trade, political, economic, and environment. And the next speaker, please, Professor Budy. Professor Budy, the researcher from the Australian National University. So Prof. Budy, PhD program in the Cornell University, and then a master degree in the University of Delaware, United States, and different with the undergraduate in the engineering, yes, in the Institute Teknologi Bandung. Okay, Professor Karimi like to make it the topic about the social justice in macroeconomic, and Professor Budy like to present it about the introduction to mixed method in economic. Okay, time for allocation for Professor Karimi, maybe 15 and 20 minutes. After that, Professor Budy. Come on, please.
Thank you, moderator. Respected Pak Budy, I am happy to sit here. Giving a topic on social justice in macroeconomic policy. Why I Ladies and gentlemen, before I start with my talk, let me briefly recollect my memory for Professor Hendra Esmara. I met Professor Hendra Esmara in 1974, 50 years ago. In 1976, I took his class
on regional economics. Okay. In 1977, I took his class on development planning. In his class on regional economics, I learned his article that published in Bulletin of Indonesian Economic Studies in 1975, yeah, on regional disparities. He taught us on how to calculate the index, the regional inequality index, Williamson index. Okay, so he gave us data, and we took our hand calculator in the class. Okay, he told us to work, and then he went to his office because his office only next door to our class. And after we finished that, and then he came back and checked our work. When I studied development planning, he told us on how to calculate Gini ratio, income inequality. And he gave us data also. And I think that's my interaction with Professor Hendra Esmara. And I was very inspired by him when talking about inequality and income distributions. He wrote a lot about it. And later, when I finished my BAs in economics, I wrote on land distributions, distribusi tanah. I used at the time the census data in 1973. Okay, and last year, BPS has conducted agriculture census collecting the same content of data. To me, it's very interesting to talk about social justice. When you are studying macroeconomics, you may check in every macroeconomics, in the index, find social justice in the index, in macroeconomics. I check many books, there is none. Maybe only one, okay, only one book written by Randall Ray, and he is the pro-modern monetary theory. Only that. And he's the only economist who talk about income distribution in his book. Okay. When I look at our experience since our independence, 1945, actually we have been talking about social justice. Never stop. Almost every day we are talking about social justice. At least once a year. During the independence celebrations, we read Pancasila. Okay? Loudly. Keadilan sosial bagi seluruh rakyat Indonesia. I don't know whether we understand what does it mean. Okay? Then I try to trace the idea of Bung Hatta. And he wrote one book that I like to read also, Ekonomi Terpimpin. Okay? I think it's 1950. On the same year, Gunnar Myrdal wrote also in World Development Journal about social justice. Okay, when I compare the idea, it's almost the same. That's the reason I quote it a lot. Many times I quote the idea. Is social justice. We don't do social justice. We cannot show it. Okay? Even we don't teach that. There is no such a subject about social justice in economics. But today, more and more economists are talking talking about social justice, because social justice will lead us to development. So that is the reason I to look the literature talking about social justice. What is the meaning of social justice? I start from Ibnu Khaldun. For those who like to read Ibnu Khaldun, there is a book, Mukaddimah. You read it, Mukaddimah.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Mukaddimah Ibnu Khaldun. When you want to talk about taxes, okay? Ibnu Khaldun talk about social justice, balance between economic power and moral society values. When we are talking about values, mostly economists like to claim that they are a free value science. Economics as a free value science. Okay. I think that is still true. When you are teaching microeconomics and macroeconomics, you don't talk about morality. You don't talk about honesty. Even we don't understand the relationship between honesty and corruption because we don't teach that. I think that is the limitation of our subject that we have been teaching in my understanding, okay? We don't relate, as Pak Iwan has mentioned, the reality with our theory that we are teaching in the class. We don't relate that. We don't find that in our theory. Any book you read about macroeconomics, say Menkyu, Samuelson, Bernanke, okay? And this time I invite you to try to read Randall Ray, okay? And this economist, I think, more inclined to post-Keynesian thinking, where economic stability is driven by equality, social economic equality, social justice, etc., etc. But when we continue only thinking within the classical economics, we will find only market efficiency, economic growth. Everything will be solved by the markets. Social justice will not happen, will not come through when you disrupt the markets. This is government intervention. The follower of classical economics doesn't like that, including the latest new classical economics. While for Karl Marx, definition of social justice include distribution based on need, critique of capital accumulations. And it is related also to the role of society in economy. And it has to affect public policy, especially macroeconomic policy. Okay. If we look at Ibn Khaldun, the idea to support government intervention to prevent injustice and corruption. While for Adam Smith, still coming back to minimal government intervention, support free markets. Of course, it is in line with the idea of neoliberalism that we are having today. While for Marx, support the abolition of private property, the abolition of private property, and collective ownership of production means. You see, from the three thinkers, there is a difference idea about on how social justice can be implemented. What about their view on inequality? Ibn Khaldun, from his book, I understand, inequality can destabilize social and political stability. Inequality can destabilize social and political stability. I try to confront with Indonesian experience before economic crisis in 1998. I compare income inequality from every provinces in Indonesia since 1969. Okay. The worst income inequality at that time is in East Timor, then Aceh, then Riau, then Papua New Guinea. Okay, so I tend to believe that Indonesian crisis in 1998, the root causes was economic inequality. Economic inequality. When we talk about economic inequality, start with wealth inequality, income inequality. I think that's very important. While we are using only expenditure inequality. When our income is rising, the world income is rising, the financial wealth is rising, the growth is rising, while wealth inequality is becoming worse, but not expenditure inequality. Why is that? In my opinion, it's because of Bansos. Okay, Bansos will reduce income inequality, while that is obtained only from expenditure. Okay, when you try to associate that, in Indonesia and in many countries, income inequality statistic is not published by statistics office. And wealth inequality, you will never find it. Even land inequality is not published by BPS, even though every 10 years they have collected the data. They're very useful data, very useful data, and it is financed by very expensive budget. But we don't have access to that. Okay, maybe I hope hacker will steal the data and share to us. Maybe other rich university can buy that, but we cannot buy that. Now, if you want to see, if you want to observe social justice, whether it is making progress in our country or not, you may compare land inequality from 1973, 1983, 1993, 2003, and 2023. The data is there. You go to BPS and ask them to give you access for the data, and then you calculate. And then you can say something what happened to our social justice in Indonesia, judging from wealth inequality. I believe it is getting worse. Why is it getting worse? The fact that hak guna usaha, who own that? Do our farmers have access to hak guna usaha? No. Who have access to hak guna usaha? The corporations, big corporation. okay, not our farmers. What happened to our farmers? Our farmers control land only 0.45 hectare per household. That's the face of a farmer. And then we are talking about social justice, okay? So what I want to say, social justice, we just like talking about social justice. We like talking about social justice. But we are not happy when we are trying to implement social justice because it relates to wealth, whether it is human wealth, financial wealth, or land control, land holding, or land ownership. So that are the key when we are talking about social justice. So when I see the thinkers like Ibn Khaldun, Adam Smith, Karl Marx, Ibn Khaldun supports inequality should be reduced, social justice should be implemented. But when we listen only to one school of thought, that is classical economics, we will not hear the story. This social justice is very important to be implemented. Even social justice is only a mirage. When you implement social justice, it means you are supporting totalitarian. That is Patrick Hayek. You read his book, The Mirage of Social Justice. Okay? But when we read Amartya Sen, okay, we can get the spirits why social justice is very important. Also, John Rawls, when you read his book, it's justice, you get the spirit. Why social justice is very urgent to be implemented, especially in our country that has been talking about social justice and well-being. Okay? And Said Kutub, maybe you Indonesians, you may have read the book Social Justice in Islam, written by Said Kutub. Okay, you read it. And also from Buya Hamka. Buya Hamka wrote another book. The title is the same with Said Kutub, Keadilan Sosial dalam Islam. Okay. When you read those books, you will get the inspiration. Okay, it may you think, it will change what you want to tell people to do. And the last from Muhammad Hatta. Okay, let me read this. Hatta promoted economic democracy and social justice through cooperative movements and a participatory economy. He believed in empowering the populace through democratic involvement in economic decisions and emphasized the importance of redistributing wealth and power. So in our country, in Indonesia, we are not lacking of thinkers when we are talking about social justice. The problem is why we don't develop that into a theory that we are teaching for our student in the class. This is my shortcoming, okay? It might be the Indonesian economy's shortcoming. They don't look at the reality because they are hesitant to go to the field to see the reality faced by our own people. We read the book and we try to convey what we read to the students in the class without connecting it with the reality. Okay, so I myself, by writing this, it's mean a correction to me also, because I've been teaching macroeconomics by using the American book. Okay, that there is nothing that I'm looking for.
every Indonesian, I believe, they are looking for social justice in the reading. But by our founder, the founding father of our country, Bung Hatta, he has written a lot, but he is disobey, in the teaching of economics. But I think we need to revive this. You read a lot of writing from Bung Hatta. There is Ekonomi Terpimpin. This is a very good book. Okay. So this is the spirits that inspire me. That we need to include social justice in macroeconomics. It is not easy, I guess, but when we are talking the narration, okay, it might be possible. But mathematically, there are people who has done that actually, okay? There are people who has done that. There is an economist who has written the optimal production of social justice. His name is Kohn. I think the European economist, okay? And he also wrote the book, the title of the book is Macro Justice. Many has studied this book. Many has discussed in the journal about this book. The importance of social justice, social freedom for the sustainability of our economy, to protect the ecosystem, to protect the environment. So the role of social justice, not only linking to economic growth, no, but also to the sustainability of our ecosystem and our environment. In this slide, you can read, I try to divide 4 schools of macroeconomics. The first, classical economics. Okay, when we are talking about classical economics, you may start from Adam Smith, Ricardo, Marshall, okay, until today. They call themselves new classical economics. Okay, but the idea is the same. No government, minimal government intervention. Okay, market mechanism will solve the problem. When you ask them how to solve when you ask them how to the market solve it. So that is the basic idea of classical economics that doesn't change until today. Starting from classical economics, Adam Smith, Ricardo, Marshall, today new classical economics. The idea is the same. No government interventions to stabilize the economy, etc., etc. The same message. So that is the reason I put here only classical economics. The second is Keynesian economics. I'm not only talking about Keynes. Okay, Keynes that responded the first, the invalidity of economic to solve the problem in the Great Depression. And then it is continued by the follower of Keynes, Keynesian, new Keynesian. And there is another group, post-Keynesian economics. Post-Keynesian economics is also different from new Keynesian economics. But the idea still justify government intervention to stabilize the economy. So that is the reason I put only one. Okay. Another school is Marxian economics. That is completely different. What is the difference? Other macroeconomics schools, they are trying to maintain the persistence of capitalism. Do not let crisis collapse capitalism. Whether they are classical, they are Keynesian, they want to maintain capitalism. While for Marxists, for Karl Marx, you have to destroy capitalism. Because this capitalism, they are very exploitative. They are doing structural genocide. You can check in the book also. structural genocide. Okay, structural genocide that support capitalism. Structural genocide that justify inequality, economic inequality. Structural genocide also that justify genocide that we have been watching in the Palestine. So the idea is not separate, okay? Economic idea and colonialism, they are not separate. Adam Smith justify colonialism. He was the member of POC, the POC for British, the East Asia Company. For Dutch, they have POC, okay? For British, they have a kind of POC also, the same. Very big company, okay? So Adam Smith also involved there. And while that company is colonizing many countries for their own benefit, okay? So there is a link between colonialism and capitalism until today that we have to be aware, okay? Especially when you read what happened in Palestine today, you will understand the link between settler colonialism, colonization, capitalism, and imperialism. Many books, scientific books, have been written about that. And I believe we are also responsible to read it and to understand.
La ilaha.
Colleague and our students, in my opinion. Okay? Then later we can understand why social justice is very important in our economic analysis, in our economic prescription, policy prescription.
La ilaha illallah.
Later, when I compare this, I found only one that are very concerned with social justice. That is Islamic economics. If you don't believe me, you read the book. Many books have been written about Islamic economics. You read from classical economics, Keynesian economics, Marxian economics, and you find there whether they are talking about social justice or not. In my reading, I found only Islamic economics that are very concerned about social justice. Okay? Only Islamic economics, they are talking about ethical economics, ethical finance. Okay? And it is considered as a solution only for Muslims by people who don't understand that. This is only for Muslims. Well, the world, only how many Muslims in the world? But when you read it, when you're talking about social justice, it does not concern only Muslims. Okay? When you are talking about ethical finance, fairness, okay, not only free trade, but fair trade, that's very in line with Islamic economy. So actually, there are many thinkers of Muslims have wrote about the importance of social justice. Not only now, it is not new, okay? To understand their idea and develop that. But we still have time, okay? Students who are studying maybe now Islamic economics and try to mesh that with economic analysis. They are not separate, okay? They are not separate. They are in line, and we can offer to the world that social justice will guarantee your sustainability, human sustainability, okay? I think that is my talk, Fajri. But I want to read one point, okay, at the end of my talk. The title is protect humanity, and stop genocide. In the heart of every nation, cries for justice ring. Voices silenced by the violence, broken soul who sing, echoes of a troubled past, shadows despair. We stand united, hand in hand, to show the world we care. Protect humanity. Let no more tears be shed. Stop the tides of genocide, where countless dreams have bled. With courage and compassion, we fight against the hate. For every life is precious, and it's never too late. Raise your voices high for those who cannot speak. In unity, we find the strength to defend the weak. Together, we can heal and make the darkness bright. Protect humanity and stand up for what is right. In every heart that is broken, in every tear that is cried, there lies a spark of hope, a chance to turn the tide. Stop the genocide. Let love and peace prevail. For the sake of all humankind, we must not fail. I think that is our responsibility when we are talking about social justice. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Karimi. Get applause again. Okay, next we please Professor Budy to the this time issue.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Fajri, and thanks all for coming to this seminar. And I would like to also thank particularly the Faculty of Economics for your willingness to collaborate with IRSA in conducting and honoring Hendra Esmara. So the idea of Hendra Esmara, when the global regional science are looking for the pioneers of regional science in its region, and I was assigned by IRSA together with Yuri to look who is kind of the pioneer working on this topic related to regional development, regional diversity, and so on. And we quickly find that Pa Hendra Esmara was a pioneer. And then we have to write a paper about him. And so I learned a bit more about the career of Hendra Esmara. And what is surprising to me and to Yuri is that he is so outstanding in such that very seldom or very difficult to find other regional economists, so economists that build their career outside Java, that could level his achievement. So we keep researching why Hendra Esmara could be like that, and whether there is a formula that we could actually tell to others, economists outside Java, if you would like to be this level, what you need to do. And to us, we could be wrong, but it seems to us there are three things that Pak Hendra did during his career in Andalas. One is specialization. So he worked on the subject of regional development, local development, and he do not, later in his life, he appeared doing trade, but almost all his career is focused on one subject. So he built an expertise. Yeah. Number one is that. Number two is that among regional economists, among economists outside Java at the time, he the one that published. Yeah, he published not many, but regular and in the relevant journal. So this is the discussion, relevant and index impact. You know, you can get impact factor high, but it's not relevant. to the subject. So by Hendra Esmara, published in the relevant journal for this region, which is the Bulletin of Indonesian Economic Studies. And number three is that he maintained a channel in which he could outreach his research and idea to Indonesia and spreading up throughout Indonesia. Pak Hendra Esmara was very active in ASI at that time. ASI, not so much he's a pengurus SI, but he's in the research part of SI. And second, he is part of the group that at that time called Pak Sumitro Jaya Hadikusumo group. So there are three things that actually distinguish him with many other academics in this region. So I thought that you might want to consider that strategy, how to be able to develop your career outside Java, but you are nationally relevant and could be acknowledged as the level of Hendra Esmara. So my talk is a bit different. So I'm not talking about topic, but I'm going to talk about method following Iwan Jaya Azis' discussion about the weakness of economists. And he mentioned several methods, and I would like to discuss a bit more on that method to achieve those what Pak Iwan has discussed this morning. So before that, there are some to this group, the economic department in Crawford. We only have master and PhD program. We don't have undergraduate. We're trying to build an expertise in Asia Pacific. Next. And within that, next slide, within that group, I belong to an Indonesia project research network that has been built since 1965. The center that produced the Bulletin of Economic Studies, but we got a lot of other activities. One on the research part, we have visiting scholar program, we have PhD student, about 20 Indonesian PhD students are studying with us. We provide small grant. The announcement for small grant was last month, and now we are actually will announce who is the winner. We have several research activities, but also we disseminate our research activity a lot, including Indonesia Update Conference in Canberra, one of the biggest conference on Indonesia in Australia. We produce the bulletin. We conduct business dialogue, high-level policy dialogue with the Ministry of Finance, and various seminar, including Forum Kajian Pembangunan, and we support Hendra Esmara Lecture. Next. And the other thing that if you would like to engage with this academic that we support, we are supporting Indonesian Regional Science as the main association that talk about regional development throughout Indonesia. And we conduct annual conference. The next annual conference is next week. It will be in Ambon, and Mas Iwan told you that in 2011 it was in Padang. So it always moved from university to university. If you are young or student, you might want to participate, because then you meet all this academic that seriously conducting research on regional development in Indonesia. And remember that this could be your network to be relevant nationally. Next. So let's talk about the mixed method. So, in a way, Pak Iwan basically promoting that this method in conducting academic research. And so my presentation talk about two things: why we want to do that, and what is it, the mixed method in general. So it is in 20 minutes. Okay. So economics is comparing to other social science are using model for one reason. And economics in most of the time asks the question, if then, if price increase, then what? Yeah. And model, mathematical model, although not always have to be mathematics, is actually a way to be able to answer if then. It simplify a lot of complexity, and then you could say that if this one this, then that one. That is David Ricardo. Yeah. So David Ricardo is basically one of the person that tell about demand curve, developing the demand curve. Is it basically if then question in basically. And analyzing if then relations, it could be right now, be not always, but it is a cluster or a group or a thing or a school of thought that is about impact evaluation. Yeah. If then is the way to describe it, not only about using mathematical model, but this impact evaluation. So if we know the impact of a certain program, what is it? So that is the if then. Yeah. Quantitative dominant in doing those things. It simplifies a lot of complexity, and it will deliver the rational if then in which economics want to ask. And if you look at sociologists, they not always talk about if then. For them, it's just describing something is probably enough. Or look at other social science. But economics, a lot of the core, and this is particularly maybe the influence of David Ricardo, but Karl Marx also talking if then, if the gap of inequality is so high, there will be restructuring of the society, which is if then question. Now, and statistic provide scientific measure on how true a relationship is. Yeah. So we actually could say that with a confident, 95% confident, an increase of this policy or this variable will increase the outcome for a certain thing. So that scientific statistic providing those scientific argument. Now, what is it exactly the impact evaluation? So the impact evaluation is basically if there are two groups, one is the one that will be get a treatment, and the other one is control. We observe before the program, and then the shock happening, and then we compare after the program. Yeah, taking into account that the control group will change as well. Yeah, so the control group is not static; it will change as well. So that's why the before and after in the impact evaluation is very important, being able to observe before and after. So this is the quantitative impact evaluation basically is as this diagram. You need to know before, you need to know the trend of the control, and you need to know the difference between the treated and the control. So that is basically impact evaluation. There are several things that make it what you observe is actually valid to show that it's impact. Is that the treatment should be unique. You only see one treatment during that period. If the treatment are two, you cannot distinguish. And it is the treatment should be exogenous, not endogenous, meaning that you are not have a choice to be treated or you are controlled. And the other thing, the way that we observe between control and treatment, it should be random. It should be balanced, and there is no anticipation. So people that you observe is not anticipate that they're going to receive a treatment or not. Okay, next. And so that in statistic is part of the statistic is part of causal inference. Yeah. So causal inference is focused on causality, no association. In basically association is if two variable move, they could be associated, move at the same time they could be, but they are not, might not be because one of the other might not be causing the other one. But causality talk about the change of the right hand side cause the change of left hand side for sure. Yeah. And causality is important for policy area because many government want to know what is the effect of the program that I implement to the outcome. For example, what is the impact of fiscal decentralization on poverty alleviation at the region. So those are a lot of government want to know, and that is causality. That we look at causality, we're not looking at association. So causality is actually helping a government to conduct an impact evaluation. Yeah, so that is causality, and this causality actually grew up very fast since mid 2000. Before that, when we learn econometric, we learn a lot of best fit, the R square. But after 2000, mid 2000, econometric is about causality. It's about causal inference. So we're not looking at R square anymore, but we're looking at identification whether our variable of interest is exogenous or not. Next. So in simplicity, causal inference changed the way that we look at econometric. So in econometric, now we only look at one right-hand side variable, and other variable could be a control, and see the effect of that one right-hand side variable in this equation is P, policy, and the effect of Y. And so we would like to make sure that gamma over there are not biased, the true impact. Yeah. To make sure that this is exogeneity or this will be a causal, we need to focus on the P, whether there is, or on the equation, whether there is no omitted variable, which is variable that is correlated with P, but not in the equation. We need to make sure that P is not suffer from measuring error, and there is no simultaneity in the equation. If you could that, then we could implement, based on Gauss-Markov theory, OLS, just OLS estimate regression coefficient is the best linear unbiased, or blue. Yeah, and there are 5 requirement: linearity, random, not perfect collinearity between the equation, and exogeneity, which is that P, the one that we would like to make sure it is exogenous, and homoscedasticity. So that is a short 5-minute on causal inference. It's about that. Next. And the technique to do that is to look at identification of the P. Yeah. And there are several techniques on identification. One is experiment, which is RCT, or natural experiment, quasi-experiment, and non-experiment instrument such as instrumental variable. That could help you to, with all the requirement, if you do it properly, it will help you to produce causality. Next. However, these days, as Pak Iwan said, that there are critics on this focus, yeah. And one of the critic is that the result of those implementation of those methods is often too simple. That exactly Pak Iwan said, it's not deep enough to understand the problem, and it appears to be naive. Yeah, very naive. Is, you know, it failed to show the complexity and the depth of the issue. Yeah. And also the method cannot be implemented in many cases, and often lack of flexibility in terms of implementing adaptive program. A lot of policy are actually adaptive. You start from a certain strategy and then move toward a better one to make sure that the impact actually beneficial. And causal inference cannot do that because you only have one type of policy that you could evaluate. And second is that those causal inference do not give you the optimal policy. So those actually what Pak Iwan said. Next. So now we would like to conduct a mixed strategy. But before that, yeah, I would like to mention first about qualitative method. So the qualitative approach is an approach without control group, but focus on the narrative approach, which is step by step. Step-by-step approach, or you follow time by time. So that's why Pak Iwan said that you probably need to stay for longer. Yeah. And the implementation of the program doesn't have to be random. It could be non-experimental. Yeah. But the way that you define it, what one thing it is true, that you need to understand the policy of change. So then when you do this, you have this mind of policy of change that actually defining you to tell what is it the effect of a certain policy. Next. And so it is also could be implemented in the impact evaluation, but no need to be random. And might not be need to have a control. Yeah? Imagine that you giving a cash transfer among the poor and then you randomize. Where is the ethical value of for that? But with the qualitative, it is a way not to do that. Yeah? But the narrative, following them step by step, is very important. Next. Next. There are several steps that you need to do, and this is the whole course of qualitative is about this. One is the selection of domain. So it is, what is it that you really look that you want to focus and observe the change of that policy. Yeah, for example, income, you need to really know. Selecting relevant sample, it's not random, but you need to have a strategy. Yeah. Data gathering, and then data analysis. Although it is qualitative, you need to have structure in conducting data analysis because you would like to maintain objectivity. And so if somebody say, well, we are doing qualitative, so you just do without structure. No, you need to have structure because you need to maintain objectivity in your analysis and reliability. And that is that part. So you need, and then you conduct a report. Next. So quick about the domain. So this is the variable that you need to watch. You need to see the beginning, and you need to be able to put that variable in the theory of change that you look. So for example, if I give PKH, people are willing to having more income, so they don't have to have their children to help them working. And so then the children education being better. So that is the policy of change. And what you observe is education of the children, for example. So that is the domain. And the domain doesn't have to be one. You could observe various domain, but your theory of change should be clear. So that is stick. Yeah. Next. And this is an example how mapping is important on qualitative. Yeah. Next. And the sampling, it could be, typically could be selective, key person technique, or purposive, yeah? And it's not random, definitely, but you need to find a sample that could actually explain what is happening. Next. In terms of gathering, most likely it will be interview, and the question are typically, although open-ended, but structured. And there are several interview that is usually in qualitative key informant interview, pick key informant, in-depth interview, you stay with the person for a long time, or convergent interview, you start from an important and becoming finding an important. So it is kind of an adaptive interview. Next. Now, data analysis, this is very important because it's qualitative, doesn't mean that you don't need structure. So one of the important thing in qualitative is coding. Coding meaning that you group it. Yeah. So for example, you argue that, well, the PKH is actually making people worse. What is it, the argument? If you're on saying that because one cases, then it is not objective. So how to make it an objective? So one is coding, And then the usual technique is triangulate. Yeah, that is a usual. It's not always triangulate. And in the qualitative, machine learning is actually coming. So there is one machine learning that quite common in qualitative is finding word. So you record all your interview with key informant, and then ask the machine to find how many people say that uh, PKH is actually benefiting us. Yeah, so they look using machine learning for that. But the key thing that you need to code. Yeah, so and this is the one that misunderstood by a lot of people. They say that, well, qualitative, I can do anything. No, you need to be objective and you need to be ensure that your outcome is reliable. Now, next. Okay, so finally is the mix. Yeah, what is it, the mix? So the mix is basically combining it, but what is it, the strategy? Next. So there are two ways in conducting a mix. You know, one is sequential, you know, qualitative, quantitative, and qualitative. So Pa Iwan said that, you know, you conduct qualitative first and then quantitative, or you could do it concurrent, parallel in doing it. So next, so I will go show you a conceptual of sequential, which is, this is what Pa Iwan said. You first understand the society, the problem, and so on, and then come up with a questionnaire, and then you conduct the questionnaire, and then you conduct analysis, but all are quantitative. But your quantitative is based on qualitative. So that is one example. But a lot of mixed approach is actually next. Next slide. You actually conducting qualitative, you do in the middle quantitative, but at the end, both quantitative and qualitative will influence your conclusion. So this is one example of a parallel. So the course of mixed method is about that in more detail. What are these variations? So the mixed method, sometimes you feel that, well, because I'm doing mixed method, I do not need to expert on quantitative. You're probably wrong. You do need to be able an expert in quantitative and qualitative, and then you could do it mixed. Otherwise, you could not do it. So and so for me, is to give message that basically you need to be careful and prepare, develop course, proper course for both quantitative and qualitative, and then you could do the mixed method properly, and so you could actually respond to the limitation of economics and regional science, as Pa Iwan has mentioned. So the yes, we understand the limitation, but to resolve it, you do need to have a structure technique. Yeah, it's not like free for all or something, but it is an exactly. Next. So with this mixed method, we expect that we could actually result a method that help develop a better outcome. Has been able to resolve both the weakness of quantitative and qualitative. We trying to reduce those weakness by combination, but we need to combine it properly. So that's the main message. So that is my presentation. Any further deep on any of this subject, you could ask, and I will respond in the Q&A. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The applause. Okay, for all of you, today we have the 10 minutes. Yeah, 10 minutes for our discussion. If you have any question, please you ask to Prof. Budy or Prof. Karimi. Yeah, okay, Nurul, and then you have the question. Come on. Kiflan, okay, right. Okay, the first, Nurul.
Okay, thank you. I'm Nurul Ilmi Cendekia. Actually, I have both questions for Professor Syafruddin Karimi and Professor Budy. So, Professor Syafruddin Karimi, we're talking a lot about justice everywhere, and we have expectation to achieve that justice. Like, since what's happening in the world today, we really want to concern about justice in the world. So, my thought that we are living in a capitalism where the domination of the world system right now is dominated by capitalism. So what's your opinion about my statement who said that we will not be able to achieve justice since we are in the capitalism round? So what do you think about it? So that's the first question for Professor Syafruddin. And my second question for Professor Budy is, you said about public policy. I have a huge interest in public policy, but before I dip down to the public policy, I have a concern whether the public policy students are focusing on taking criticalism for the policymaker or focusing on making a new public policy in reality. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Iflan.
Okay. Thanks to Prof. Karimi, my lecturer in Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Andalas, and thanks for Prof. Budy to coming to Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Andalas. Let me introduce myself. My name is Kiflan. Is a student of Magister of Economics at Universitas Andalas. About mixed methods, in my opinion, is a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods. In quantitative methods, I'm familiar with it, but in qualitative methods is a little bit. Our qualitative methods, my question is, are qualitative methods is come from the result of quantitative methods or what? But my opinion is the qualitative methods is come from the quantitative result in the research. But it's clear, it's my question. Thank you very much, Prof. Budy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Very much. Next, Dr. Endrizal.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fadri. Yeah, actually, these lectures, three lectures today are very related. First, Prof. Iwan talk about income inequality, and then Pak Karimi talk about social justice, and Pak Budy about the mixed method. So for Professor Karimi, is social justice, is perfect social justice reflected by perfect wealth distribution or perfect wealth inequality or equality? Now, if so, how can we achieve that without coercion, without totalitarianism, without dictatorship? Okay. If not, who decide what best justice for us? Okay, that's first. The second one for Prof. Budy. Now, if we want to incorporate this justice to our research, because that's very subjective. Now, how mixed method can help us, say, to do impact evaluation on some policy, say, land reform, on the outcome, like how do we do it qualitatively and quantitatively? Thank you very much. That's all.
Ada Pak Udan.
Yeah, this is just my thinking, especially to Professor Syafruddin Karimi. As far as I know, in Islamic, we know that people can become richer and richer. So Islamic laws, Islamic, what we call, allow people to become richer and richer. And also in Islamic, we also know that there are poor people. So it is just nature is, into my mind, that there are rich people, there are poor people. So it's a nature in Islamic. So why we say that if people becoming richer is, and also some are poorer, are not justice, are not social justice. As long as the richer can do something for the poor, that's okay. Yeah. Why should we say that it is not justice? It is not just. It is not social justice. That's it come to my mind. Second, if you look at what in practice, what happened in the world, in the Western world, in practice, yeah. So they actually practicing what we say Islamic thought. For example, you mentioned about the market perfection. Market is the way to achieve the social justice. Mentioned about that. But in practice, we know that in the Western countries, they do what we call government intervention. There are lots of big, huge government intervention in Western country for market failure. So I think that's not, we cannot say that it is, if you say that or classical economics is in practice, it is not in practice actually. It is just in theory. In practice, basically, what happened in the Western world, they are practicing what we call market failure, government intervention for the market failure, and let the market, if there is no market failure. Why we don't need to intervene when the market is working properly? That's in practice what happened in the Western world. So what's wrong? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. These are very challenging questions, okay? Starting from Ilmi, right? Okay, Pak Endrizal and Pak Udan. I am not wondering actually, why many scientists today are trying to explore about social justice. More and more economists are interested in studying social justice. Okay. When I relate to what Pak Iwan talked earlier about the first welfare theorem, they're doing that because they are concerned with welfare, but they forget the second welfare theorem that talks about distribution and redistributions. Okay. When I met economists, many economists in ICAI especially, when we talk about distribution, they respond that it is a long run issues. Okay. When I compare to what Keynes said, in the long run we are all dead. Okay. So if we follow that idea, redistribution will never happen. It only a game. Okay. So Ilmi asked me question, what to do? Because we are in the middle of capitalistic system. Okay. We have to be aware where we are going to as a nation. We have constitutions. What we have been written in our constitution since our independence. We have to read that. Especially educated people. We have to read that. If we don't like that, if that doesn't answer our problem, why don't we change? Why until today we still maintain keadilan sosial bagi seluruh rakyat Indonesia? Why? Just for lip service? I think we have to be very serious about that. Okay? Not only talking about that. So, sistem ekonomi Pancasila, okay? I agree when we need to develop that. Okay? We have BPIP. They want to develop sistem ekonomi Pancasila. What kind of economy Pancasila should be constructed, there we need to contribute, in my opinion. That is the way how we are dealing with the global capitalism. Many research has shown that capitalism has created inequality, economic inequality. Many research about that. Economic inequality is supported by what they call structural genocide. You will die gradually, not immediately. When physical genocide, like in Palestine, you will die immediately. Okay? Immediately. But when you are talking about structural genocide, you will die gradually. It is practiced by capitalism. Okay? We don't find that in the regular macroeconomics, but many economists have written about that. I think young people should read also, okay? And in my opinions, it is not late for us when we want to protect our economy that is in line with our own values, with our own norms. Okay? Then you will meet Islamic economics for that. In Islamic economics, the community can be divided into two groups. The first community that has an obligation, and the other cluster is community that has a right. So this is the mechanism to bridge this process. Following the Sharia will create social justice, and the government should support this. Okay, different from socialism. Socialism, they have to take to convert the property owned by the community, by the people, to become the state owned. Okay, that is in socialism. While in classical economics, they don't care about that. They don't care about that because they don't believe in market failure. They don't believe in that. And this is corrected by the Keynesians. What you see in Europe and in other countries, and also in our countries, we tend to follow the idea of Keynesianism, where the government should interfere to create economic stability. Okay, so that is a different when we are talking about Keynesians, classical, Marxians, and Islamic economics. Islamic economics, they have the ethical issues there, the values, Islamic values, as talk about how should we manage the economy, how should we deal with the poor, how should we deal with the rich. There is a rule already. There is a rule already. While when you go to Keynesianism and Marxians, the rule depend on the ruler, depend on the ruler. While in Islamic economic, the rule is there. Everybody has access to read it, to understand it, and to implement it. Okay. And I want to close with Pak Endrizal. Okay? I think we are not talking about perfect equality, Pak. According to Islam, it is in natural. We are not talking about perfect inequality. Everybody has the same asset. And then we call it, it is social justice. It is justice. No, I don't think so. What I think, when we follow Islamic teachings, that is a fair interdependence, a fair interdependent, a fair interactions according to the Sharia. That's what I read in the book, okay? When we follow the book of Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun, it's very real, okay? It is not outdated. When we read the book, and then if the ruler likes to implement that, it is very, very up to date, actually. And many Muslim thinkers, like Hamka, you imagine Hamka talk about social justice, okay, and how to implement that. Even though Hamka are concerned more about education, on education equality, access to education, okay. So I think if we in Indonesia committed to maintain, to upgrade, to promote social justice, I think we will be one in the world, since we are almost 300 million, 87% are Muslim, they believe in it. So it is not difficult to teach them. Different when you teach people communism, okay? They don't believe in communism, and then you teach them. While Islam, they believe it. Not only for their own life in the world, but also for their life in the hereafter. So you connect today and the hereafter. So that is the superior in thinking about Islamic economics in relation to social justice. The problem, according to the critics, it is difficult to connect that with the global capitalism, as Ilmi asked. I don't think so, because today, like Islamic banking, not only Muslim own that, not Muslim also has Islamic banking, because they are looking at the value, okay, the norm that they consider just and fair. I think that is my response, and thank you very much.
Yeah, just quickly. So the first one on critic or solution, is my philosophy is that when we learn something, we learn to critic first, and then we could come up with a solution. So it's always good if you take a course that you don't believe on what the lecturer said. There must be something wrong with the lecture. So the way that you learn is by doing that. If you listen to our seminar, the first thing that you have to in mind is that, oh, I have a different opinion. Oh, this is not right. So that is typically the way that we encourage a student. We typically ask them to be critical, and then they might have a solution. Second issue, whether actually supposed to be qualitative supporting quantitative or quantitative supporting qualitative. There are a lot of school of thought over here. If you are more structural, you typically say that the quantitative is actually supporting the qualitative, because you would like to describe the whole complexity and the story, and then you prove it that your argument is objective by quantitative. But also a lot of people say that, particularly those who are what they call it data-driven people, they tend to have a qualitative as supporting the quantitative. And in this world of so on justice, the complexity of justice is this: justice and equality are two different things. In justice, there is kind of norm coming in, and that norm is sometimes difficult to define. It's a subjective norm, sometimes it's grouping norm, and that is where qualitative could help, to understand the norm. And then we could use it, for example, sometime if you are driven toward data-driven, you use it as a new variable. So this is the group of in economics that talk about welfare. If you look at the way that they ask about welfare, it's so complicated, trying to get the norm and putting it into a quantitative, But there are also groups that keep doing that. The norm is like that, and then some of the norm is shown by a quantitative. So that is the combination. Now, I just want to give a comment on one thing. So, Iwan talk about social justice and growth. So within this growth, what is actually also important is a combination between social justice, growth, and efficient. So the neoclassical, a lot of them are talking about efficient and growth. And so balancing those three is actually important. I mean, if you have a social justice, but you're not growing or you're not efficient, it's not, resources are limited. Yeah. So balancing those three things is important. Um, Definitely, we cannot just talk about social justice without efficient and growth. Resources are so limited. So then being efficient is also important. And there is the part where the qualitative could set up, because a lot of them are, for different region has different norm, different institution. And Pak Iwan also talk about institution, yeah. So I have a different institution, but after you understand all of this, whether you would like to have qualitative supporting by quantitative or quantitative supporting by qualitative is really depending on what school of thought you are. And nothing really like 100% correct. Nothing really that 100% correct. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much uh, to Professor Karimi and Professor Budy. So because the time up, I'm not to make the conclusion for our session. So thank you very much for the question, for the participant. I close this session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, the next session is to Professor Syafruddin Karimi and Professor Budy will receive plaques. Kindly, please kindly help to the committee. Okay. Please pay attention, ladies and gentlemen, before we close statement. So next we have closing remarks from the head department of economics and business, Mr. Fijri Muharja.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Everybody, thank you very much for your participation in our Hendra Esmara Lecture series. Yeah, this is the second lecture series for the regional development. Thanks for the IRSA, Indonesia Regional Science. Thank you very much, Professor Budy from the NU, Professor Iwan Jaya Azis from the Cornell University, and Pak Saf, Professor Syafruddin Karimi from the University Andalas. As you know, the Hendra Esmara, the senior lecture, we make the uniqueness for our study program in the regional and planning. Yeah, so we hope for this event for the next time. Reborn the new Hendra Esmara, for the next in the young generation for the next time. Jadi kita berharap dengan event ini teman-teman baik dari S1, S2 dan S3 memahami apa yang dimiliki oleh Profesor Hendra Esmara, bahwa Pak Hendra itu adalah penciri dari program studi kita. Dia adalah seorang regional science yang merupakan pionir di Indonesia. Kita berharap melalui kegiatan ini sekali 2 tahun akan melahirkan nantinya pada suatu masa ada Hendra Esmara yang baru. Terima kasih atas perhatiannya. Mohon maaf atas segala kekurangan. If I make mistake when I say, if I make mistake when our department or our faculty to organize this event, I ask you apologize. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Now we are at the end of the lecture session. Thank you so much to our remarkable speaker, Professor Syafruddin Karimi. Thank you, Professor Budy. Thank you so much for coming. Professor Data, Professor Mr. Endrizal, Mr. Hendrizal, and Mr. Ferry for sticking together at this room till end. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming and watching this lecture session from Professor Iwan Jaya Azis talking about welfare economics. Professor Syafruddin Karimi talks about social justice and economics, and from Professor Budy is talking about mixed methods in economics. Hope all of you will get more understanding in 3 of the lectures for today's session. I'm Nurul Ilmi as your MC for this session. Thank you so much and apologize for any shortcomings. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bapak Ibu, nanti jam 2 bagi mahasiswa S2, S3 dan juga dosen ada kelas advance macroeconomic in bahasa dengan Bapak Profesor Iwan Jaya Azis. Silakan datang ke departemen. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Recording stopped.